The night air was thick with dust and gunpowder as uniformed men pushed their way into the underground passage. Their boots pounded the packed earth in unison, rifles raised, eyes sharp against the dim glow of lanterns. At the head of the unit moved Rex, a muscular German shepherd whose nose and instincts led the way. His ears twitched at every sound, his body tense with focus. Suddenly, from the shadowed corner of the tunnel, a figure stepped out with a weapon drawn. The enemy had been waiting. Chaos erupted, gunfire cracking in the tight space. Soldiers ducked for cover, while Rex lunged forward, muscles coiled like springs. He barreled into the armed smuggler before the shot could land, knocking the man to the ground. Dust filled the air, shouts rang through the chamber, and the operation had begun with fire and fury beneath the earth. Rex's handler, Derek Langston, pushed through the line, heart racing. He saw his companion pinning the smuggler, growls echoing in the cramped chamber. Soldiers rushed past, advancing deeper into the labyrinth of tunnels. Shots ricocheted off wooden beams while the air grew heavier with smoke. But Rex didn't hesitate. His sharp eyes darted forward, tracking movements in the dark where human senses failed. Beyond the chaos, another figure darted down a hidden passage, dragging crates marked with foreign stamps. Rex broke free and sprinted ahead, his paws striking hard against the earth, tail straight like a guiding spear. The soldiers followed his lead, trusting the instincts of a dog that had sniffed out bombs, tracked fugitives, and saved lives before. Every step was urgent, every second mattered, and in that moment, Rex was not just a dog. He was the tip of the spear in a silent war beneath the soil. Gunfire cracked behind them as soldiers secured the entrance, but Rex pressed forward, pulling Derek and the unit toward the deeper chambers. The tunnel walls closed tighter, forcing men to stoop low beneath beams blackened by soot. The air smelled of oil, sweat, and damp stone, and the silence between bursts of gunfire was thick with menace. Then, from ahead, a metallic click echoed. A trap. The soldiers froze, eyes wide, hearts pounding. Before anyone could react, Rex stopped short, body rigid, nose pressed to the dirt. He growled, pawing at the ground, signaling danger. A bundle of wires stretched across the tunnel floor, ready to detonate hidden explosives. The unit's breath caught in unison. Slowly, carefully, a soldier moved forward to disarm the device, guided by Rex's warning. The moment passed in strained silence, and then the unit pressed on, every man now knowing that without Rex, they might not have survived. The narrator's voice carries us back 3 days earlier, before the raid, before the gunfire, when Rex was simply a retired canine living quietly on Derek's family farm. The mornings were still, the fields golden under the sun, and the barn stood like a sentinel at the edge of the land. Derek often found peace repairing fences and tending to his animals, while Rex stretched in the grass, his body finally free from the daily grind of patrol duty. But despite the quiet, something restless stirred in Rex. Each night, when the moon cast silver light across the barn, the German shepherd grew uneasy. His paws scratched at the floorboards, his ears pressed back, his growl low and steady. Derek dismissed it at first as nerves from an old working dog, but Rex knew better. Beneath those boards, something hidden waited, a secret carried in silence for far too long.
On the fourth night, Rex's persistence could no longer be ignored. He barked sharply, clawing at the barn floor with an urgency that pulled Derek from his sleep. Lantern in hand, Derek stepped into the barn, its wooden beams creaking under his weight. He tapped his boot against the floor where Rex scratched. Instead of the familiar thud of solid earth, a hollow echo rose. Derek frowned, crouching to press his ear against the boards. The sound was unmistakable. This barn had stood for decades on solid ground, yet here the floor gave back an empty sound. With a crowbar, Derek pried up one board, then another, revealing a rectangular opening framed with old beams. A wooden staircase led downward into blackness. Rex whined, tail stiff, body poised like a sentinel. Whatever was hidden there had been waiting in the dark for more than just curious eyes. It was waiting for discovery. The air that drifted from the hole was damp and metallic, tinged with the scent of something unnatural. Derek lowered his lantern, shadows flickering across the steps. Rex pressed forward without hesitation, his nose guiding the descent. The staircase creaked beneath their weight, carrying them into a corridor carved with precision. Wooden beams lined the passage, reinforced as though crafted by professionals, not farmers. The earth halls bore fresh scrape marks, proof that this place was not abandoned. Rex's nose twitched violently as he sniffed the ground. His handler followed his gaze to a line of fresh footprints pressed into the dust. Someone had been here, and recently. The lantern's glow revealed crates pushed against the wall, stamped with markings Derek didn't recognize. Rex growled, ears erect, body tense. This wasn't a forgotten tunnel of family history. It was an active hideout, and whatever it concealed was meant to remain hidden.
They moved further, the lantern light trembling across the rough walls. Soon, they reached a chamber wider than the barn itself. Tables stood against the edges, covered with maps, papers, and objects wrapped in canvas. Derek lifted one of the sheets, revealing diagrams of state buildings, shipping routes, and border checkpoints. His stomach turned cold as he realized these weren't just old records. They were plans, detailed, current, and dangerous. Rex padded to a corner and barked sharply, scratching at a crate. Derek swung the lantern closer, revealing stacks of metal canisters sealed tight, their surfaces etched with unfamiliar codes. The smell stung his nose, chemical and sharp. Explosives. His chest tightened as the truth settled in. This tunnel wasn't a family secret. It was a staging ground for something far larger, something aimed not at one farm, but at the very security of the nation itself. Derek's mind spun with disbelief, but Rex never wavered. His nose pressed against the dirt, following the trail deeper, ears sharp to every sound. At the far edge of the chamber, a narrow passage led outward, cool air drifting in. They followed it, winding through earth until it opened at the edge of a creek beyond the farm. There, under overhanging roots, lay the marks of recent passage, boot prints, horse tracks, and fresh tire impressions pressed into mud. Someone had been moving supplies in and out, concealed from the world above. Derek knelt, running his hand over the marks. This was no forgotten relic. It was alive, active, and dangerous. Rex barked sharply, his body pointed down the creek, as if urging Derek to act. He had found the proof. The danger wasn't a theory anymore. It was here, operating beneath our feet, bold and ready to strike.
The weight of responsibility pressed heavy on Derek's shoulders as he stood in the creek bed. He returned to the barn with Rex at his side, his mind racing. Every crate, every plan, every chemical canister had meaning. This wasn't a crime to ignore, and it wasn't something one man could handle. He gathered what he could carry, maps, documents, fragments of coded letters, and locked the barn tight. Rex sat at his side, eyes watchful, chest rising and falling in steady rhythm. Together, they made the ride into town before dawn. At the sheriff's office, Derek laid down the evidence, his voice steady despite the storm in his chest. The sheriff's eyes hardened as he scanned the maps, recognizing the danger. Soon, telegraphs were sent, calls made, and messages relayed. By sunrise, the farm was no longer Derek's alone. It had become the center of a coming storm, fueled by Rex's discovery. Within hours, unmarked wagons rolled quietly into town. Men in plain clothes stepped off carrying cases that hid the insignia of the state. The army arrived at dusk, their uniforms blending into shadows. Derek stood by, uncertain, but Rex pressed against his leg, calm in the presence of order. Plans were laid out on long tables inside the sheriff's station. Soldiers and officers studied every route, every symbol, every line of code. The evidence painted a chilling picture, a network of smugglers hidden beneath the valley, plotting sabotage against the government. Supply lines, explosives, coordinated strikes, all of it traced back to the tunnels under Derek's barn. Rex sat quietly,
his eyes following every movement, his nose occasionally twitching at scents clinging to the papers. Though silent, his presence filled the room. The men didn't doubt it. Without this dog, none of them would have known the storm gathering beneath their feet.
Plans for the raid formed quickly, urgency in every word spoken around the table. At first light, a joint force would descend on the farm, sealing the tunnels, cutting off escape, and capturing every smuggler within. Derek was ordered to stay behind, but Rex was not. His record as a canine spoke louder than any protest, his name written into missions that had saved lives before. He was the one who had found the cache, the one who could sniff what men missed. He would lead them in. That night, Derek sat beside his dog in silence, lantern dim, barn closed tight. The air smelled of hay and oil, and in the quiet, he thought of his grandfather who had built this farm. He never imagined the ground beneath held treachery instead of roots. But now it was Rex's ground, and the dog's instincts would determine the course of the battle to come. Before dawn, the operation began. Soldiers moved like shadows, their boots muffled, their breath sharp in the cold. Lanterns were doused, rifles checked, and orders whispered. The barn stood in silence, unaware of the army gathering around it. At the signal, the boards were lifted, the hidden entrance revealed. One by one, men descended the stairs, their shoulders brushing the earthen walls. Rex went first, his handler close behind, tail straight, ears pricked. His nose darted side to side, drawing them down the winding passage. The tunnel smelled of damp earth, oil, and sweat. Crates lined the walls, shadows looming across maps pinned in haste. And then came the sound, a shuffle, a breath, a voice in the dark. They were not alone. The smugglers had returned, confident in their secrecy. But this time, their lair was no longer hidden. The hunt had come to them, led by a shepherd's nose. The tunnel exploded with movement as smugglers sprang from the shadows, weapons drawn, their shouts echoing through the narrow chambers. The soldiers answered with rifles, muzzle flashes burning bright against the earthen walls. Smoke filled the air, choking and blinding, but through it all Rex surged forward. His handler shouted orders, but Rex needed none. He lunged where scents were strongest, pulling men toward enemies crouched behind cover, exposing hidden fighters who would have struck from the dark. The soldiers followed, trusting him more than sight. Crates splintered, dust rained from the beams, and the ground trembled with every step of combat. The smugglers fought with desperation, but they were cornered, their secrets unraveling before their eyes. Still, the battle was far from over. The tunnel stretched on, deeper and more treacherous, and every shadow promised another threat waiting to strike. Through the clash of gunfire and shouts, Rex froze suddenly, body rigid, nose to the ground. He barked sharply, pulling Derek toward a corner of the chamber where crates were stacked high. Soldiers covered them as Derek pushed aside the wood, revealing wires running along the floor to a hidden charge. A bomb lay nestled against the wall, enough to bury them all alive if triggered. The smugglers had prepared for discovery. Sweat broke across brows as one soldier knelt, trembling hands working against the ticking threat. Seconds stretched into eternity until the final wire was cut, silence rushing in like a flood. Rex's nose had saved them again, the difference between survival and collapse. The men exhaled in relief, but no one doubted the message. The smugglers hadn't just hidden their weapons here, they had turned the tunnels into a trap, ready to collapse if their empire faced exposure.
The deeper the soldiers pressed, the more elaborate the tunnels became. Reinforced beams stretched overhead, carved markings etched into walls, and chambers opened wider, built for more than simple hiding. One chamber revealed rows of cots, blankets folded neatly, and lanterns still warm with use. This wasn't just a storage site, it was a base of operations, lived in and maintained. Rex sniffed through the beds, growling low at scents still fresh. Derek's chest tightened as he realized just how many had been living under his land without his knowledge. Beyond the chamber, another passage led down, colder air rushing upward, carrying the metallic scent of more weapons.
The men prepared to descend again, rifles raised, breaths steady. They knew what awaited. The smugglers had dug deep, both into the soil and into betrayal. But Rex was relentless, his nose locked on the trail, leading them further into the heart of danger. As they moved deeper, the tunnel suddenly widened into a chamber lit faintly by smuggled lanterns. Wooden shelves lined the walls, stacked with maps and documents detailing every step of a larger plan. Border crossings, shipping schedules, supply routes, all charted in precise handwriting. Derek lifted one, his hand shaking at the scope. This wasn't just a small-time smuggling ring, it was an organized network, one that could destabilize entire regions. Rex sniffed the parchment, his growl low, pulling Derek's eyes toward the far wall. There, concealed beneath a canvas sheet, stood crates heavier than the rest. When pulled aside, the soldiers found rifles, explosives, and sealed boxes marked with foreign symbols. It was undeniable now. This was an arsenal, hidden beneath the soil, ready for war. And without Rex, it might have remained buried until the day it erupted against the nation above.
A smuggler bolted from the shadows, firing wildly before disappearing down a side passage. Shouts rang out as soldiers gave chase, their boots pounding against earth. Rex tore after them, his handler barely keeping pace. The dog's nose cut through the smoke, through the turns and splits, locking on the scent of fear. The side passage twisted, narrow and treacherous, until it opened into a chamber more massive than any before. At its center, men hauled crates toward a concealed hatch in the floor. They had been moving supplies even as the raid unfolded. The soldiers poured in, rifles raised, but the smugglers fought with desperation, their empire collapsing around them. Rex lunged at the nearest, teeth sinking into fabric as the crate tumbled free. The chamber filled with chaos, men grappling, weapons clattering, every heartbeat louder than the last as the fight reached its fiercest pitch. The chamber roared with violence, fists and weapons clashing in the confined space. Derek ducked beneath swinging blows, his heart hammering as soldiers pressed forward. Rex, agile and fearless, darted through legs, his jaws snapping at hands reaching for detonators. The air stank of sweat, oil, and gunpowder, every breath harsh against lungs. Then, a sound cut through the clash, a scraping, grinding noise from the far wall. Derek turned just as a hidden panel slid open, revealing a second group of smugglers emerging with lanterns and weapons. Reinforcements had been waiting. Panic threatened to crack the soldiers' line, but Rex charged, his body colliding with the lead smuggler, breaking the ambush before it could unfold. Soldiers regained their footing, rifles blazing, and the chamber erupted again. The smugglers had prepared for every contingency, but they hadn't prepared for Rex. His instincts turned the tide, holding the line when men nearly faltered.
Gunfire dimmed as the last of the smugglers in the chamber were subdued, groaning under the weight of shackles. The soldiers gathered, breaths ragged, sweat streaking through the dust on their faces. But Rex was restless. He sniffed the air, tail stiff, eyes fixed on the hatch in the chamber floor. Derek followed his lead, prying it open with a crowbar. Beneath lay another descent, darker than the rest, the air flowing upward cold and damp. Soldiers exchanged uneasy looks, but none argued. Lanterns were lit, rifles readied, and one by one they climbed down. The tunnel below was narrower, more suffocating, its walls slick with moisture. The air smelled fouler here, tinged with iron and rot. Rex's growl reverberated in the silence, a warning that what lay ahead was not just weapons or plans. It was something darker, a final layer of treachery hidden deep beneath the earth. The descent ended in a chamber larger than any before, carved with deliberate care. Along the walls, shelves held ledgers and coded books, their pages marked with symbols the soldiers didn't recognize. At the center stood a long table, scattered with maps of coastal defenses, troop placements, and communication lines.
Derek's heart sank as he realized this wasn't just a smuggling ring, it was espionage. The network beneath his land had been feeding information to foreign agents, planning sabotage at a national scale. Rex barked sharply, leading them to the far side where crates stood half open, revealing uniforms stitched with insignias not their own. The silence grew heavy as the truth settled in. This wasn't just treachery against neighbors or towns. This was treason, plotted beneath the very soil where Derek had grown up, and it had nearly gone unseen, if not for a shepherd's unrelenting nose.
Suddenly, a smuggler hidden among the shadows leapt forward, hand pressed to a detonator wired to the walls. Soldiers froze, fingers tense on triggers, but any wrong move would mean collapse. The man's eyes burned with desperation, knowing the network's secrets were minutes from exposure. Derek's breath caught, heart hammering as he stared at the switch. Then, Rex moved. With a snarl that tore through the silence, the shepherd lunged, faster than thought. His jaws clamped around the smuggler's arm, dragging him to the ground. The detonator clattered free, seized by soldiers who swarmed in. Dust rained from the ceiling as men shouted, the chamber trembling with restrained disaster. When silence finally settled, every eye turned to Rex. The dog stood over the subdued smuggler, chest heaving, eyes bright. He hadn't just saved lives, he had saved the truth, keeping the weight of the earth from burying it forever. With the detonator secured, the soldiers advanced to the final recesses of the chamber. Hidden compartments revealed caches of weapons, sealed documents, and coded journals. Each discovery tightened the scope of the conspiracy. It was not local, nor even regional. This was international in scale, built carefully through decades of secrecy, poised to strike when least expected. Soldiers gathered every item, boxing them for evidence, while Derek stood silently, the weight of betrayal heavy on his shoulders. His farm had been turned into a fortress of treachery without his knowledge. But Rex pressed against his leg, grounding him in the moment. The shepherd's instincts had ripped the veil from a plot meant to remain invisible. Outside, distant horns signaled reinforcements arriving. The tunnels no longer belonged to the smugglers. They belonged to justice, and every step forward carried the weight of victory.
The final resistance came at the deepest corner of the tunnels, where the ringleader and his closest men barricaded themselves behind crates. Shouts echoed as soldiers demanded surrender, but the smugglers answered with gunfire. The chamber filled with smoke, flashes of light tearing through the dark. Derek crouched low, his heart pounding, but Rex surged forward, nose locked on the strongest scent. His handler shouted, but Rex darted through the chaos, weaving between cover, dodging bullets that cracked against the walls. He lunged at the ringleader, knocking the man backward, jaws snapping at his coat. The smuggler tumbled, weapon clattering free as soldiers swarmed in to subdue him. The resistance broke in an instant, the men too shocked by the shepherd's ferocity to fight on. Shackles snapped closed, weapons clattered to the ground, and the tunnels finally fell silent. The network had been crushed, undone by tooth, claw, and courage. When the last man was secured, soldiers exhaled as though surfacing from deep water. The air was thick with smoke and dust, but for the first time the silence carried no threat. Lanterns swung gently from beams, casting shadows across crates stacked like tombstones of betrayal. Officers moved quickly, cataloging every document, every weapon, every coded message. The scale of the conspiracy was staggering, reaching farther than anyone in the chamber could have imagined. Yet for all their training and discipline, the men knew the truth. Without Rex, much of it might have remained hidden, waiting to erupt at a moment of weakness. The shepherd stood in the center, his chest rising and falling steadily, his eyes bright with focus. Soldiers patted his back, voices low with gratitude. In the tunnels beneath the farm, he had proven not just his loyalty, but his place as the heart of the mission.
Above ground, the dawn broke golden across the valley. Soldiers emerged from the tunnels with crates, papers, and shackled prisoners, their boots stirring dust in the morning light. Townsfolk gathered at a distance, whispers spreading like wildfire as they saw what had been unearthed beneath the Langston farm. Wagons rolled out, heavy with evidence, guarded on all sides. For the townspeople, it was revelation. The quiet land they had always known hid not just roots and soil, but a network that threatened everything they held dear. Derek stood apart, Rex at his side, watching silently as the last prisoners were loaded away. His heart was heavy with shame that his family's land had been the smugglers' chosen hiding place. Yet pride stirred too, knowing it was his dog who had torn the veil away, saving not just the farm, but countless lives beyond its borders. In the weeks that followed, the story spread beyond the valley. Newspapers carried headlines of a hidden network exposed, a conspiracy dismantled, and a German shepherd at the center of it all. Officials spoke of the bravery of the soldiers, the precision of the raid, but always they returned to Rex. The dog had found what men overlooked, saved lives in the heat of battle, and revealed treachery buried for years. Derek watched as strangers came to the farm, not to buy goods or trade, but to see the barn where history had shifted. Rex took it all in stride, his calm gaze steady, tail thumping softly as if none of the attention mattered. For him, it was instinct, training, loyalty. For the nation, it was heroism. His name became a symbol, whispered with respect, carried on voices that would never know the danger he had silenced beneath the earth.
Recognition, swiftly. At a gathering in the county seat, officials stood on a wooden platform, their voices carrying across the crowd. Soldiers in uniform flanked the stage, rifles gleaming, while townsfolk filled the square. Derek stood at the edge, Rex at his side, both humbled by the attention. When the officer called Rex's name, the crowd erupted in cheers. The shepherd stepped forward, tail high, ears perked, eyes steady. A medal hung from a ribbon was fastened around his collar, the symbol of valor earned in silence and blood. Cameras flashed, newspapers scribbled, and the crowd's roar shook the square. Derek's chest swelled with pride, not for himself, but for the companion who had given everything without asking. Rex had been a dog of service, a partner, a protector. Now, he was a hero in the eyes of the nation, honored for his courage beneath the ground. After the ceremony, Derek returned to the farm with Rex, the land quieter now, cleansed of the shadows that had haunted it. The barn stood empty, the tunnels sealed, the soil settled once more. Yet every board and beam carried a different weight now. Derek knew his farm had been a battleground, a place where treachery had nearly spread like poison. But thanks to Rex, it was also the place where truth triumphed, where courage turned back the tide. He leaned on the fence, watching the field sway under the wind, Rex lying content at his feet. The dog's chest rose and fell in the rhythm of peace, his eyes half closed, but always alert. For Derek, the farm no longer felt tainted. It had been scarred, yes, but it had also birthed redemption, forged by paws that scratched away silence and teeth that tore down betrayal.
As the sun set, Derek saddled his horse for a ride into town, Rex trotting faithfully beside him. The valley stretched wide, bathed in crimson light, its quiet deceptive after the chaos it had held. Yet Derek no longer feared the silence. He knew what had been buried here, and he knew it had been defeated. Townsfolk greeted him warmly as he passed, their eyes often dropping to Rex with admiration. Children waved, calling his name, while elders tipped their hats in respect. Derek smiled faintly, though words often failed him. He knew the truth. Rex was not simply his companion, not simply a retired canine. He was the reason families still slept in peace, the reason the valley remained theirs to call home. And as the pair walked through the town's heart, they carried with them a legacy stronger than land or silver, honor forged in loyalty. The story closes with Rex lying on the porch of the farmhouse, the evening breeze rustling through the fields. His ears twitch at the faint sounds of the world beyond, his body relaxed but ever watchful. Derek sits nearby, the weight of the past weeks lifting slowly, replaced by gratitude. The tunnels beneath the barn are sealed, the smugglers jailed, their plans dismantled before they could bring harm. Life has returned to rhythm, but it will never be the same. For every step Derek takes across his land, he remembers what was uncovered, what was risked, and what was saved. Rex lifts his head, eyes bright, tail giving a slow, steady wag. He is no longer just a guardian of one man's farm. He is a savior of countless lives, a hero whose instincts and courage changed the course of history beneath the soil of a quiet valley.